hands and feet bound, a towel stuffed in his mouth. Torture. A rope around the throat, slowly tightened, again and again. Murder. He brutally murdered 10 people and hid for 31 years, almost getting away. But he was finally caught after taunting the police. For 31 years, he was the American public's worst nightmare. Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm DarkCaseX. When you mention the BTK killer, almost every American knows the name. This man could be called the most high-profile criminal in U.S. history. This incident took place in Wichita, Kansas, in the United States. Wichita covers over 130 square kilometers, with a population of about 400,000. It was originally a quiet and peaceful small city. But in the 1970s, an extremely vicious serial killer appeared here. During his crime spree, the killer was particularly keen on communicating with the police. Through phone calls, letters, the media, and other means, he maintained constant contact with the police. Through this method, he seemed to satisfy his arrogant psychological thrill. He once questioned the police like this: "How many more people do I have to kill before my name gets in the paper?" It's truly unimaginable that the killer's motive was simply to become famous. Although the case caused a huge uproar at the time, the police had no idea how to bring the killer to justice, because the killer murdered just for fun. His targets were chosen at random. This made solving the case extremely difficult. The police searched for 31 years, but still had no leads. Just when everyone thought this would become a cold case, a prosecutor stepped forward. He turned the tide and finally captured the killer. This meant that a famous cold case in American history was finally closed. So what exactly happened back then? And how was the BTK killer caught? Let's travel back to 1974 and start with a family massacre. January 15th, 1974. It was an unlucky and cold Friday. Around 7 p.m., 15-year-old Charlie Otero, as usual, went straight home after school. But when he opened the door, he didn't hear his family's usual greetings. The house was very quiet. Even his little dog, Millie, wasn't barking. Charlie found it very strange. He walked straight to his parents' room, and then he saw a horrific scene. His father, Joseph Otero, was tied up tightly with a plastic bag over his head. Lying motionless on the bed, his mother, Julie, was lying next to his father. Her hands and feet were also tied, and a towel was stuffed in her mouth. Charlie was terrified. He rushed over, only to find they were no longer breathing. Charlie quickly left the house and yelled for help from nearby neighbors. When the neighbors who came to help tried to call the police from the Otero's landline, they discovered that the phone was not working. Upon closer inspection, the phone line had been cut. Around 9 p.m., the Wichita police arrived at the scene. Police found that the victims were not just Mr. and Mrs. Otero. In the bathroom, they found the body of Charlie's 9-year-old brother. He was also bound hand and foot with a plastic bag over his head, dead from strangulation. In the basement, they found the body of Charlie's 11-year-old sister. She was hanging from a water pipe. Her lower body was exposed, dead from strangulation. A towel was also stuffed in her mouth. Later, the police conducted a more detailed examination of the bodies. They found that the female victims had not been sexually assaulted, but semen was found in the basement. So the police suspected that the killer masturbated while murdering Charlie's sister. This case stunned the Wichita police. Police believed it was a premeditated family annihilation and deduced the approximate sequence of events. The killer first waited for Joseph to take Charlie to school, then quietly snuck into the victim's home and cut the phone line beforehand. This was to prevent the victims from being able to call the police while he committed his crime. Then, in the afternoon when Joseph was not home, he broke in and killed his wife and 2 children. Finally, he encountered Joseph returning home at the door. He quickly hid in the shadows, ambushed him, knocked him down, bound, and strangled him, and finally placed him in the bedroom. So what kind of person would kill an entire family like this? The Otero family had moved here less than a year ago, and Joseph was a respected retired veteran. There was no reason for him to have such a deep grudge with anyone, although there was DNA at the scene. At that time, Wichita's DNA identification technology was limited to deducing blood type. Although the killer's blood type was determined to be O, this is far too common in the population. It was impossible to accurately identify a suspect. The tragic case of the 4 Otero family members remained unsolved. 3 months later, a new victim appeared. On April 4, 1974, 21-year-old Catherine Bright was murdered on her way home. Catherine's cause of death was almost identical to the Otero family's. First bound, then strangled. Although the police realized these cases were likely committed by the same killer, they still made no progress in the investigation. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air. Over the next few months, the police relentlessly pursued leads, looked for eyewitnesses, provided a description of the culprit, and created a composite sketch of the killer. In October 1974, 3 people actually turned themselves in, all claiming to be the killer. However, they were all imposters. But this behavior angered the real killer. On November 3rd, a reporter for the Wichita Eagle received an anonymous phone call. The caller admitted to being the killer. He told the reporter to go to the Wichita Public Library and find a certain book. The reporter hurried to the library, found the book, and discovered a letter inside. The letter read as follows: "The 3 young men you caught only confessed to the crime to get attention. They know nothing about the case. I did it all by myself. No one helped me. Only the person who wrote these 3 letters knows the horrible details." Josephine was hung in the northwest corner of the basement. Her glasses were tossed in the southwest corner of the bedroom. The letter described many details of the murders in the Otero family massacre. These details had never been made public by the police, so only the police and the killer knew them. At the same time, in the letter, the killer hinted that there would be more victims. The letter ended with, "When this monster entered my brain, I will never forget it. Maybe you can stop him. I can't. He has already chosen his next victim. For me, the keywords are bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK. Signed, what is BTK? Bind, torture, kill." The BTK killer used bind, torture, kill as his moniker. 3 years later, on March 17, 1977, 24-year-old Shirley Vian was at home with her 3 young children. The killer secretly locked the children in the bathroom, then entered the bedroom, closed the door, beat her, bound her, and finally strangled her to death. Just as the killer was about to go to the bathroom to commit a new murder, the phone suddenly rang. This time, he had forgotten to cut the phone line. This panicked him, and he left in a hurry. The 3 children were lucky to escape. On October 8, 1977, another murder occurred. The location of the crime was very close to the location of the previous case. The killer seemed to have targeted this small area, looking for those he considered suitable victims. That evening, 25-year-old Nancy Fox had just returned home from work when she was knocked out, bound, and strangled by the killer who had been lurking. Not long after Nancy's death, the police received a report. The caller was the killer himself. The killer informed the police of the murder he had just committed. "Yes, you will find a homicide at 843 South Pershing. ... Nancy Fox. When the police arrived at the phone booth where the call was made, the killer was long gone. More than 2 months later, in February 1978, the Wichita Eagle received a package. This package not only contained a letter, but also a poem the killer wrote for his victim. At the same time, a Wichita TV station also received a letter from the killer. In the letter, he said, "When I have already killed 7 people and am going to kill more, the media might as well give me a nickname. I prefer the following nicknames: the BTK Killer, the Wichita Strangler, the Poetic Strangler, the Wichita Hangman." The police finally decided to issue a warning to the public. A serial killer was on the loose in Wichita. Citizens should pay more attention to their personal safety. This announcement was a big deal. It immediately made the entire city feel uneasy. The people of Wichita, the first thing they did after returning home every day was to check their phone lines. If they found it was disconnected, they would immediately run out of their houses. As for housewives, they didn't dare to leave their homes casually. Even when going out to buy groceries, they would return home as quickly as possible and lock all the doors and windows. At night, no one dared to go out for a walk. Wichita, and indeed the entire state of Kansas, was plunged into fear. It's unknown whether the police's heightened attention was effective, or if the killer couldn't find his next target. For the next few years, the BTK killer disappeared. The Wichita police formed a special task force to continue hunting for BTK. They investigated everyone in their jurisdiction who seemed strange, but ultimately came up with nothing. During this time, the police consulted criminal psychology experts about the BTK killer's disappearance. The experts gave three possibilities. First, the killer moved away. Second is he's dead. Third, he's in prison or a mental hospital. Later, the experts added another reason: the killer is bedridden. However, not long after the experts gave these speculations, on April 27, 1985, after 7 years of silence, another body was discovered. The victim was Maureen Hedge. At the same time the body was found, the media received numerous photos of the victim. This crime didn't quite fit BTK's usual pattern. The killer strangled the victim in the suburbs, then took the victim's body to an abandoned church, where he took many nude photos, and then dumped her body by the sea on September 16, 1986. A 28-year-old woman in Wichita, Vicki Wegerle, was murdered. The manner of her death was identical to the previous crimes committed by BTK. 5 years later, on January 19, 1991, another murder occurred. At that time, 62-year-old Dolores Davis was in her apartment, enjoying her retirement. After she had fallen asleep, someone threw a hollow brick through her glass door. The loud noise startled her awake. She jumped out of bed and opened the door to check the situation. Before she could figure out what was happening, the killer rushed forward and strangled her. The murder weapon was a pair of pantyhose from the clothesline by the door. Her body was later found under a bridge on the northern outskirts of Wichita. There were no witnesses. The police found no relevant evidence. The killer also did not contact the police. After this case, the killer seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth again. No one knew where he had gone. Even the police began to suspect he was dead. The unsolvable bloody case hung like a shadow over the city of Wichita, Kansas, for 30 long years. In the 1978 letter, BTK had already claimed responsibility for 7 murders. But were the 3 later murders committed by a copycat? No one knew. All leads came to a halt here. However, the shadow he cast still lingered in the hearts of the citizens, refusing to dissipate. On the 30th anniversary of BTK's crimes, prosecutor Robert Beatty published a book about the case. Beatty pointed out in the book that BTK would not kill again, and he might even be dead. On the surface, it seemed like prosecutor Beatty was capitalizing on the case's fame. In reality, he had another goal. He wanted to use this book to draw the killer out. If the killer was still alive, when he saw this book, he would very likely reappear, because for the BTK killer, this was a provocation. Sure enough, on March 19, 2004, a letter was sent to the newspaper. It was a confession from the killer about the 1986 murder of Vicki Wegerle. The signature was the familiar name, the BTK killer. The killer believed the police were too incompetent. He couldn't stand that after committing such atrocious crimes, he was still being forgotten. In the letter, he not only described the crime in detail, but also provided photos of himself dressed as the victim at the crime scene, and his own drawings. The serial killer, who had been missing for years, reappeared, causing a huge sensation in society. The Wichita City Police took this very seriously and reopened the investigation into this murder mystery, targeting the BTK killer's desire for fame. The head of the BTK Serial Killer Task Force, Lieutenant Ken Landwehr, issued a statement to the media, hoping to communicate with the BTK killer. In Landwehr's words, "I want him to understand that he has finally gotten the infamy he so desired." To the police's surprise, the BTK killer actually responded. Starting in March 2004, he didn't commit any more crimes, but he frequently communicated with the police. This method of communication was mainly mailing notes and packages. During the 10 months of communication with the BTK killer, the police's investigation never stopped. Once, the BTK killer left a package for the police in a pickup truck in a parking lot. The police reviewed the parking lot surveillance footage. After analyzing over 2,000 hours of footage, they finally determined that the BTK killer was driving a black Jeep. During his communication with the police, the BTK killer made a fatal mistake. He asked the police if they could trace the user through a computer disk. If the police could guarantee that they couldn't trace him, then he would use disks to send information to the police in the future. The police lied, claiming that they could not get user information from a disk. The BTK killer actually believed this lie. In February 2005, a Fox affiliate in Wichita, STV station, received an envelope containing a floppy disk. Subsequently, computer experts, based on the metadata of a deleted Word document, found a keyword,
是一个教会。
and the last person to modify that document was named Dennis. By searching local church information online, the police found a man named Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader was an Air Force veteran with an associate's degree in electronics from Butler County Community College and a bachelor's degree in administration of justice from Wichita State University. He had served as a field operations supervisor for the census and was also the president of a local church council. He held a certain status in the community. 424 001A 48 266 to 0 hours 13 minutes and 50 seconds 600. He and his wife Paula had 2 children.
与他的妻子宝拉有2个孩子。
To his family, Dennis was a good husband and a good father. He looked like an ordinary middle-aged man. Could a man like this be that terrifying and twisted serial killer, BTK? The police quickly arrived at Dennis's residence. On the street, they saw the parked car in front of his house, that black Jeep. But whether it was the computer, a floppy disk, or the Jeep, it was all circumstantial evidence. If they rashly arrested Dennis at this point, they might not be able to convict him, and it could also tip him off. So, Lieutenant Landwehr ordered all officers to retreat, just as the police were in a dilemma. An unexpected witness appeared. Influenced by the information released by the police and the appeals to the public, Dennis's daughter, based on various signs, began to suspect her own father. She provided her blood sample to the police. By this time, DNA technology had greatly advanced. The BTK semen sample extracted in 1974 was now re-examined and compared with the DNA from the blood provided by Dennis's daughter. The lab results showed that her DNA and the BTK killer's DNA information left at multiple crime scenes had a similarity of over 90%. With this, the police identified Dennis as the prime suspect. Shortly after 12 p.m. on February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was driving home for lunch. The police arrested him under the pretext of a traffic stop. In March 2005, balding, wearing glasses, and dressed in a white suit, Dennis appeared in court to face trial. The District Court of Wichita, Kansas, formally began the trial for Rader's 10 counts of first-degree murder. In court, when questioned by the judge, Dennis admitted to the crimes he had committed. Then, Dennis calmly and in detail described how he selected his targets and the process of his crimes. He also said that in private, he would write down the details of his crimes in a book and took many photos of himself tied up, as well as his victims, as souvenirs. He also liked to wear a mask when committing crimes. Listening to Dennis's description, all the police officers finally felt a sense of relief on this day. In August 2005, the trial concluded. Because during the period of Dennis's serial killings, Kansas did not have the death penalty. So Dennis was ultimately sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences. To this day, Dennis Rader is still serving his sentence in a Kansas prison. The case ends here. So who exactly was this Dennis Rader? Let's travel back in time again and take a look at his life story. On March 9, 1945, Dennis Rader was born in Kansas to an ordinary family in Wichita. Besides him, there were 3 other children in the family. As a child, Dennis liked to play pranks. For example, hiding in the bushes by the road and throwing small stones at passersby. According to Dennis, when he was in elementary school, his favorite thing to do was to choke his friends from behind with his hands. That feeling was very nice. He would also often fantasize about doing these things. He got into a lot of trouble during his childhood. The most serious incident was when he was 11 years old. He seriously injured a female classmate with a stone. His parents ended up paying a lot of money to settle the matter. Later, according to his confession, he had already started abusing animals as a child and had a sexual fetish for women's underwear. Eventually, he would steal women's underwear to wear himself. Although he had these bad habits in secret, Dennis hid them very well. On the surface, the impression he gave was that he liked to fight and cause trouble, but his grades were very good, especially his ability in math and science, and his hands-on skills far surpassed those of his peers. Overall, he was still very well liked by his teachers and was often praised by them. In 1964, 19-year-old Dennis, with his excellent performance, was admitted to Wichita State University, majoring in administration of justice. But he chose to enlist in his sophomore year, joining the U.S. Air Force. In the military, he was mainly responsible for mechanical repairs. He was successively stationed in Greece, Okinawa, Japan, and South Korea. He was discharged in 1970 and returned to his hometown to continue his unfinished studies, enrolling at Butler County Community College. During the next period of time, studying, dating, and making money, Dennis did it all. In 1971, Dennis married a girl named Paula. His wife Paula was a German-American. Later, in 1975, in 1978, she gave Dennis a son and a daughter. At the same time, Dennis was also working part-time in a workshop. He could do jobs like mechanical repair and assembly. In June 1972, Dennis inexplicably attacked a woman who was returning home. He was in prison for 6 months. Because of this incident, he was almost expelled from school. In 1973, received an associate's degree in electronics from Butler County Community College. After graduating, he then enrolled at Wichita State University, graduating in 1979 with a bachelor's degree in administration of justice. In November 1974, Dennis found a job at a security company where he worked until he resigned in 1988, and the murders he committed, most of them were done during this period. After resigning, Dennis began to build his perfect persona. First, he served as a field operations supervisor for the census. With a very positive attitude, he devoted himself to planning community church activities. Later, he volunteered at an animal control center, specifically managing those stray animals that could pose a danger to pedestrians. He was also elected by the residents to become the president of the local church council. At this time, Dennis was living a completely normal life. All of Dennis's actions were seen by the community residents. Everyone thought he was a very upright person. Looking back at the first half of his life, a solid marriage, 2 grown children, he watches the kids at home, and his wife has a stable job. He held various public service and volunteer positions. He was a typical middle-class man. In terms of character, he appeared kind and attentive, led some very positive activities, and was enthusiastic about public welfare. He often helped his neighbors. In the eyes of those who knew him, he was a good family man, a good husband. For Dennis Rader, his true inner world was actually very simple. In his life experience, it seems he wasn't as miserable as other serial killers. But he wasn't as ordinary as a normal person either. So what was it that turned him into a serial killer who acted on his whims? Let's talk about 3 main points of Dennis Rader's criminal psychology. First point, antisocial personality disorder. Dennis's older brother, Jeff Rader, later revealed more details about Dennis's childhood. Dennis was doted on by his mother since he was young, and their mother-son relationship was always very good. But his relationship with his father was average. His father had held many jobs, but he often couldn't hold them for long and would become unemployed. Every time the family fell into financial hardship, it was almost always because of his father's unemployment. Although his father was unsuccessful, he didn't take his anger out on the children. Fighting with his mother became a daily routine. Every time Dennis saw his parents fighting, a spark of violence would ignite in his heart. Around the age of 10, Dennis held a deep-seated hatred for his father. He even fantasized about strangling his father to death, but obviously it was impossible. Because his father was strong, so he came up with a plan after his father got drunk. During the brief moment he staggered up the stairs, he would push a cast-iron roll-away bed down the stairs to see if he could crush his father to death. If that didn't kill him, he would finish him off by hand. But this plan was never implemented, because every time his father came home drunk, he would pass out directly downstairs. He never went upstairs. And Dennis, after waiting for his father upstairs several times and failing, fell asleep by the stairs. The plan had to be abandoned. As he got older, Dennis gradually entered puberty, and the antisocial side of his personality became more and more serious. He often wanted to fight with people, but he didn't easily reveal his behavior. According to his childhood friend, Faulkner, from his appearance, you couldn't understand what kind of person Dennis was. He would never easily hurt a stranger, but he would occasionally attack me suddenly. Believe me, I was like a brother to him. I knew him better than anyone. He was smart, sly, even likable. But his heart was evil. Dennis once made a pair of brass knuckles and would deliberately provoke classmates to fight to test if the knuckles actually worked. Besides that, Dennis also often dragged Faulkner along to do pranks. The two of them would go to a farm to steal eggs. and then use them to throw at trolley cars or roll tires down a hill at passing cars. They would also throw rocks at church windows. In his sophomore year of college, Dennis was involved in a brawl. To escape punishment, he immediately joined the Air Force. During his service, he used his intelligence to easily pass all kinds of promotion tests. He was promoted very quickly. From all these things, we can easily see that although Dennis had many violent behaviors and thoughts, these things were often forcibly concealed by him. Only a very few people could see them. In his life, most people saw a reliable, popular Dennis Rader. One thing is certain: Dennis Rader's antisocial personality disorder was not as severe as other serial killers. For him, killing didn't need to be as bloody as it was for other sadistic, perverted killers. On the contrary, he didn't like his victims to be covered in blood. So his method of subduing victims was beating, not using a blunt weapon. What he wanted was to witness the slow process of the victim's death. Witnessing this victory, this ecstasy of being above death, was like eating. Second point: an abnormal internal self-verification mechanism. First, let's analyze the timing of Dennis's crimes. From the first case to the second case, there was a gap of less than 3 months. From the second case to the third case, cooling off period was about 3 years. From the third to the fourth case, the gap was less than a year. From the fourth to the fifth case, the cooling off period was about 7 years. From the fifth to the sixth case, the gap was over a year. From the sixth to the seventh case, the cooling off period was about 5 years. This tiered cooling off period illustrates some issues. That is, some criminal acts can be put on hold or even be replaced. Overall, the rules of the game Dennis Rader set for himself, the basic model was, on average, to commit linked cases within a year, using BTK as his signature. While satisfying his sexual needs, he created an atmosphere of terror. Whenever the public's fear of BTK was about to dissipate, he would strike again to ensure this social attention. Every time Dennis seemed to have stopped, it wasn't really the case. During his cooling-off period, he was watching every day the progress reports on the case and the public's panic, afraid to go out. These were the nutrients that sustained him without committing crimes. And when the attention gradually faded, people's lives gradually returned to normal, and discussions about BTK became less and less frequent. That's when he would strike again. This kind of abnormal internal self-verification mechanism driven serial killer generally has the following characteristics. 1. Compared to other serial killers who are completely dominated by sex, they appear more premeditated and rational. For each criminal act, they can carefully design it, treating each crime as their performance for everyone to see. 2. The cooling off period is generally quite long. This is because, in his view, killing is not the most crucial part. The most crucial part is the social sensation caused by the killing and the panic of the public. Third point: a serial killer's distorted desire for self-expression. Dennis's desire for self-expression came from the pleasure his crimes brought him. There are mainly the following points. 1. He treated killing as a chess game with the police. He felt joy at being able to defeat the police in the game he designed. From his criminal acts bringing a sense of panic to every housewife in society and even every ordinary person. He felt a sense of self-verification. 2. The process of killing can be seen as conquering the victim, which is also a form of self-verification. The peak of this self-verification development was at the end of 1985. In the case of Maureen Hedge, 53-year-old Maureen Hedge was strangled to death. The killer ritualistically first took Hedge's body to a church, where he took a bunch of nude photos. This is because the killer saw bringing Hedge to the church as a challenge, bringing the victim to God's home on earth, to commit sacrilege here, to show how powerful and arrogant he was. 3. The process of killing can bring sexual pleasure. In summary, this was a case with binding and strangulation as the basic criminal methods, with the root motive being to satisfy an abnormal internal self-verification mechanism and other personality disorders, a serial murder case. A father of 2, a respected church leader, would brutally harm 10 people, destroying other people's families. For the BTK killer, by killing someone completely unrelated, what did he actually gain? Dennis Rader said this: "It's a thrill, a satisfaction and joy, and a sense of dignity. Humans have their own unique dark side. This is a point that even those who consider themselves good people find it hard to deny, and Dennis Rader's dark desires far exceeded those of ordinary people. From a young age, he knew how to perfectly disguise himself, deceiving everyone who loved and trusted him. On one hand, he used killing to mock the police, satisfying his twisted psychological needs. On the other hand, he actively participated in public welfare activities and liked to host large banquets with his wife at home to entertain friends. I wonder if Dennis's family and friends, at the moment he was arrested, felt a chill in their hearts. Dennis's daughter later wrote a book, A Serial Killer's Daughter, My Story of Faith, Love, and Overcoming, which recorded her story, faith, and how she overcame her predicament. Of faith, love, and overcoming. Talking about it has helped heal me in a way nothing else could. I was in my 20s, and although Dennis got the attention he wanted, and criminal history will record his name, these achievements are meaningless. Even after pleading guilty, Dennis still showed no remorse, relishing the details of his crimes. The belt that I used, the belt I wore to work, and I had to come back. We always worked a little bit, which just didn't belong to her. He was a bad guy, and she needed to be put away. He spoke for over 30 hours. And he showed no remorse, no regret. The only regret he showed during this was that there weren't more victims. Evil people never repent their sins. They only regret getting caught, and the law punishes evil people. On one hand, it's the punishment they deserve. Another, more important purpose is to prevent such evil acts from happening again. Alright, now that the video is over, please help support us with a like, share, and subscribe. A simple click is a great encouragement to me. This is DarkCaseX. See you next time.